wander through the houses. Tonight you wear a different mask than you wear most nights. Instead of plastering your face with smiles and laughter, you wear a skeleton. You carry an old pillowcase over your shoulder, the weight of all the candy in it pushing on your back. Most days and nights you spend hidden away in your own world, pretending to be there, pretending to care. But tonight, on All Hallows Eve, you can be yourself. You walk up on a house giving up candy and push on the doorbell. An old woman opens the door and she smiles down at you. You hold out your pillowcase and say, "Trick or treat!" The old woman drops an odd piece of candy in your bag and walks off. You rifle through the bag and look at it. It is sticky in your hand and reminds you of being alone, of days spent wishing to be elsewhere. You look over the wrapper and see that it is called Greetings from the Fifth River. I'm your host Athet, the spooky, scary skeleton that speaks with such a shriek. The reason the G fell off the graveyard sign, it that is the great pumpkin, they that you have nightmares of on Christmas, it who waits in a little shop of horrors, and the incarnation of all that is spooky. Right now, I'm carved on a jack-o'-lantern. Now I have some grave keeping to catch up on. Firstly, it's All Hallows Eve. Rejoice. Spend some time with your friends, both living and dead, and enjoy the day and night of rest from mourning. Secondly, the blood sun won't be rising today. It has no place here. Death has no home in our realm today. The blood sun shall rest. Finally, please remember not to refuse candy to anyone who comes to your door tonight. The reasons for this are twofold. Firstly, it is common decency. Why wouldn't you want to give candy out? Too busy eating it all yourself? That's just selfish. And secondly, not all things that come a-knocking are human, and none will take kindly to being turned away. Our top story for tonight, the skeletons in the graveyard just down the street from Four Rivers, yeah, you know the one, have begun their dance macabre. Every year, for as long as the blood sun has risen, on All Hallows Eve, they too have risen from their slumber and danced down to the town common. This has become known as the marker of the start of All Hallows Eve, and when those bones get dancing, the celebration begins. Many people will join these skeletons in their jovial dance down the street, talking with long-lost friends about lives they once shared. Oftentimes, a dance-off will arise between a passed-on relative and their living descendant, attempting to resolve the eternal debate between who is better, the Bone Boys or the Fleshy Folks. Many businesses take advantage of this large crowd of people and put up stalls along the dance path, selling festive items to the dancers or those who gather to watch the dance. It is not entirely clear how this tradition started. On the first All Hallows Eve after the rising of the blood sun, skeletons arose from their graves and began dancing. Upon being questioned why, they simply shrugged and continued their party. Eventually, some began dancing to the common. There are no records as to why they did this. Over time, this has been passed down from the elderly dead to the fresh dead, each new generation changing it just a little bit. And as for our second story, the local pumpkin patches have devolved into warfare. For as long as local history can remember, there have been 3 families who run the local pumpkin business. The Cucurbita, the business of which is currently run by Oram. Secondly, the Grasscar family, whose business is, at the moment, controlled by Gold. Finally, the family Herbits, and their pumpkin business is controlled by Zolotto. Each of these families claims to have something that makes their pumpkin superior. Whether that be a special trick while raising them or a trait that only their pumpkins have. Firstly, the Cucurbita family. The Cucurbitas have been here the longest, I think, and I'm pretty sure they invented the jack-o'-lantern or something. Look, I'm not really that sure. The eternal eye of current events that I draw from doesn't really like pumpkins, but I'm trying to figure this out. Okay, so they've been here for a very long time and attempt to use that as their main selling point. If it ain't broke, why fix it kind of mentality. Very classic pumpkins. The second family is the Grasscar. The Grasscar family prides themselves on their unique and never-before-seen styles of pumpkins. They are some of the few brave, or stupid, enough people to venture out into the blood sun with pumpkin in hand. They attempt to mutate these pumpkins with the power of the blood sun, hoping to obtain something that will leave a mark on the pumpkin world. Some of their most popular pumpkins are... I don't know. The eternal eye of current events is really afraid of pumpkins and thus refuses to give me a lot of clear info on them. But I do know that they make rainbow pumpkins, as I am currently carved on one. And lastly, and possibly least, I'm not sure, the eye isn't telling me, is the Harbuts family. The Harbuts family prides itself on its cheap yet solid pumpkins. Zolotto continuously makes sure the prices on the pumpkins never rise and never try to advertise themselves as something special. The Cucurbita's family pumpkins may be simplistic, but because of the length they've been around, they have... Oh, come on, I was really getting into it. What is your problem with the pumpkins? Okay, fine, I'll see what I can do. Dear listeners, I have just made a deal with the eye. I need to get it some candy so it can have like a treat to get through informing me about pumpkins. I would like to note, dear listeners, the eye has no physical form. I do not know how it plans on eating the candy, but who am I to judge? I also don't know how I plan on buying the candy, as your simplistic human eyes fail to perceive me, but I'll figure something out. Maybe I'll ask the farmhouse for a favor. More on this story to come as warfare continues, but first, I need to get some candy for my eternal eye of current events, so it's time for some sponsors. Greetings from the Fifth River is absolutely terrified to be sponsored by watching horror movies backwards. Do you want to brag that you watched that movie without getting scared at all? Do you want to watch a movie without understanding the characters, plots, or dialogue? Well, have I got the thing for you. Watching horror movies backwards. Just pop that sucker in, use scene select to go to the end, then put the playback speed to -1. For when you want to watch horror movies without being scared, watch horror movies backwards. Greetings from the Fifth River is only mildly spooked to be sponsored by clocks. Seconds tick away into minutes, and minutes tick away into hours. Time flows around you as you stand stagnant. Stars are born and die in the blink of an eye. People love you and leave you before you can even process the concept of them existing. You could have spent an eternity with her, curled up next to the fireplace. But good things can't last, and she left you just as all before her. Don't let the good times slip away. Buy a clock. Know the time. And now, a PSA regarding being alone on All Hallows Eve. As far back as Rune can remember, they didn't actually have any friends. Sure, some people drifted in and out of her life. They had a table to sit at during lunch sometimes, but they never had someone to really call a friend. Now she sits on the stoop of a stranger's house, watching the dance macabre goes by. They stare at the people and the skeletons dancing, each absorbed in their own little world. She doesn't know why they do this to themselves every year. Every year they come down to the dance macabre. Every year she convinces herself that maybe she will have a good time. They feel something push them from behind, shove they from the steps into the streets. As they twist around to see it all, they manage to catch is a face, warped and twisting, smiling with teeth that forgot to exist and flesh made of bones and bones made of flesh. She lies in the middle of the streets, the dance macabre swirling and moving around her. Some folks step and offers her a hand up, but they know if she looks, it'll just be that same damn face again. It'll just be someone pretending to care so they look good. It'll just be her mom again. And now, back to our top story for tonight. The dance macabre has finished making its way to the common, and the party has begun. There are refreshments being served to both humans and skeletons, hot cocoa, cookies, and some beans that someone found at the back of their cupboard are being served to humans, while the skeletons have been given some rather tasty-looking dirt, as no one really knows what skeletons are meant to eat, skeletons included. As the normal sun has begun to rise for the first time in a year, trick-or-treating has started. This is a classic tradition that seems to go back before the first rising of the blood sun, which means the knowledge of both myself and the eternal eye of current events is limited. It seems to have started with a young man named Trick Whiteman and his brother Treat Whiteman. On All Hallows Eve, they would travel to people's houses and ask people to vote on who was their favorite of the two of them by giving them a piece of candy, thus trick or treat. If you plan on going trick-or-treating, here is a list of places you should know, either to avoid or because they will give out the best candy. The rotting husk of the community market will either give you a right Twix or a rock with the words wrong Twix painted on it. There is a 50-50 chance. If you ask a skeleton nicely, they're likely to give you one of their ribs. The van parked on Main Street with the word hello written on the side of it with too many wheels will whisper to you. It will whisper things that chase you through your dreams. It will whisper things you've never wanted to hear and always dreaded knowing. It will whisper in a language that burns to hear. It will whisper my name in a language you will fail to comprehend. Stop by it if you want a fun way to spend an evening. There has long been a myth that your children's candy will be poisoned or filled with razor blades, or have little men in them that will teach your children naughty words. All of this is false. There has never been an event of any poisoning or little men in your children's candy. My fellow makes sure of that. News that isn't me likes to stir up false fear as they care too much about their viewer numbers. Worry not, the only fear I instill is completely true. All Hallows Eve is a time of safety and rest, so worry not, dear listener. I would, however, like to note there is definitely a little man in your candy, and he will tell you that the 2020 election was stolen. Do not listen to him. I have managed to procure the eternal eye of current events a king-sized Snicker bar, and that seems to have made it happy enough to tell me about pumpkins. Sadly, I did have to owe a favor to the farmhouse to get that done. Let's hope it only asks me to clean the roof or something, unlike the last poor sap who owed them. I still shudder to think what's left of him. That aside, the three pumpkin families have started sneaking into each other's pumpkin patches and destroying the pumpkins. It is easy to tell which family has destroyed which pumpkins, as the cucurbitas have been using sledgehammers, tearing through the pumpkin fields without a care in the world, the classic old way of destruction. The Gascar have been using quote-unquote tamed squirrel beasts from the nearby woods to obliterate the pumpkins, while the Harbas have simply been using rocks that they found. Local lawmakers are attempting to pass legislation to stop this mad pumpkin destruction, but they're always bribed with promises of free pumpkin pie and a really cool-looking jack-o'-lantern. One law has successfully been passed, however, it had the inverse effect. It turns out the Venn diagram between anarchists and pumpkin farmers happens to have a very large overlap. Thus, they ignored these attempts to quell their feud. However, now that All Hallows Eve has began to pass, this violence will rest, at least for another 11 months. That, dear listeners, marks the end of our broadcast for tonight. I wish all listeners a fun All Hallows Eve and remind them that the blood sun will be rising tomorrow. I have been your host, Athet, the spooky, scary skeleton that speaks with such a shriek, the reason the G fell off the graveyard sign. It that is a great pumpkin, they that you have nightmares of on Christmas, it that waits in a little shop of horrors, and the incarnation of all that is spooky. And I wait excitedly for the next night that I can say, "Greetings from the Fifth River." There's a bonus scarier story in the description of this episode. Greetings from the Fifth River is written and produced by Finks. Hello, that's me. I would also like to give thanks to Anya, Tim, Daggers, and Ren for their continuous support of not only this project, but my writing as a whole. Finally, I'd like to appreciate Miss Crosby, Mr. Lederer, and Chelsea for being teachers willing to support me in this production. The title card is made by Tim. The outro music you're listening to right now, and the intro music are The Mechanisms Leitmotif by The Mechanisms and arranged by Snowpossum. Have a nice night, dear listeners.